Hello and welcome to the M&A Advisor, M&A Advisor TV. We're here with Scott Estill. He's a partner at Lancor. Scott, thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
And you were on a good panel this morning. Not all of us got to watch that, but tell us what your affiliation is with M&A transactions in general. I know you have had a bit of a history in investment banking.
Sure, yeah. So I did spend most of my career in the front end being an investment banker, a variety of different firms, and then realized my frustration with traditional M&A, I guess, is that you take two companies in the same industry, in the same size. 4 years later, one's a 5 times your money, one's a 0. So you go back and wondering, why is one company so much more successful? And the regression on that analysis is it's down to the people and their ability to pivot and transition during that ownership period to generate differentiated alpha, as opposed to just financially engineer your way to return. So that's the sort of the premise of our firm at Lancor. Is we do two things. One is retained executive search. We do about 100 of those a year for PE firms, CEO, CFO, and operating partners. But then the other side of the business is more, I would say, proactive, where a PE firm will say, geez, we're thinking about buying company A, B, or C. We figure out who runs that asset, who used to run it, and then go to those executives and say, listen, on the one hand, we need a new CEO, and if you want that job, we can talk about it. But maybe you don't want to change your job because you're good at it and that's how we got your name. So why don't you keep your job, and then you can meet PE firms, not when you're looking, but when you're not. You can co-invest with them, you can get equity, you can join boards, all without changing your current gig. If you want to change, great, but there's an awful lot of value that can be created outside of just convincing you to change your job. So that's the proactive, reactive model that we have at Lancor.
Yeah, and like you say, it's not just going out and offering someone one position where you're interviewing dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of candidates, and then only one person actually ends up with the role. This is a way to utilize more of those relationships that you've made.
I think that's right. I think a lot of the problem is the private equity universe has been so institutionalized that there's a lot more private equity companies out there chasing a similar amount of deals. So you could argue that would cause potentially irresponsible purchase price multiples and higher valuations. So being able to use sort of operational talent to figure out, what do you think the 2 to 3 pillars of this investment thesis should be? And that insight most of the time gives you conviction not to buy an asset for all the reasons you don't. But every once in a while you say, wow, there's some good levers here to pull outside of market share gain or cost cutting that could be helpful. So you're right, it's taking advantage of sort of a bad math where one person gets a gig and 99 don't. How do you take advantage of the other really thoughtful 5, 7, 8 people in that industry and offer them ways to create value outside of just having them change jobs?
And when you have introduced this model and seen it play out, how do you find the connections to be? Is it let's say it's a CEO that you've connected with? Is that someone that you're able to build on for other uses later on, whether it's for private equity firms or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long-term game, right? And so as opposed to being overly transactional, which is let me convince you to change jobs again on the search side of the business, it's let's figure out your style, your leadership style. What are you good at? Where are your holes? Where are your blind spots? Let's be thoughtful about that. And then, having spent most of my life on the M&A side with PE, who do I think would be a good partner for you, executive? Not just, today getting you to change jobs, but 2 years, 5 years, 7 years from now. The more I get to know you as an executive, the more I think you should meet this partner at this shop, not necessarily PE firm A versus PE firm B. It's the right person at that PE firm that would sort of gel with the executive talent that we're talking about. So it feels more bespoke, and hopefully everybody wins because it's a longer term relationship as opposed to a transactional one.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, I mean, a lot of investment banking is about the relationships that you have, and that's really what you're corralling as well, those relationships and connecting them with different partners that would make strategic sense, let's say.
That's right.
So thinking about that though, I mean, how do you find the private equity firm as well? Are they very approachable to this? Do they want this feedback?
Yeah, so I think that the fun part is a lot of them historically, so they think, they trust your judgment and enjoyed working with you in different capacities. And then adding this as a unique sort of value creation capability, they find it helpful. It's not, because the pain point for them is, it's not just finding deals, which is very hard because there's so many people chasing those same amount of assets, but it's finding those people. So when you can not episodic, but systematically introduce people each month. Hey, partner A, who specializes in consumer or industrial healthcare, here are 4 people who are just really good. You should get to know them. Mm-hmm. And same thing, so the PE firms like it, the executives like it, because again, it feels like a real relationship. You're fostering that because we all get busy and you're chasing down the deals you're working on. And it's hard to be too far ahead in the future. You're just fighting fires in front of you. So if we can be helpful building those longer term relationships, they do find it quite helpful.
And the level of executive that you work with, is it just CEOs, C-suite type people, or would it be sort of more people on the ground as we think about, human capital having multi-layers and having, there'd be a lot of benefits coming from the operations crew on the ground as well?
Absolutely. So you're right. Most of the talent that we know is CEO, CFO, COO, C-suite talent. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of operating partner talent. And so that is an industry that's a business and a title that's evolved a ton over time. It used to be very specific of someone who came out of GE and they're at the end of their career, for example. Now it's 35 to 40-year-old folks. It's male, female. It's a variety of different backgrounds, because what they're offering is in the weeds P&L understanding of an asset, which many PE firms are good at, but they haven't spent their whole career doing that. They're often deal professionals. So marrying those two things, so I think is helpful. So I think that the most variety comes in the operating partner world, but then again, to your point, we're doing CEO and CFO and COO searches as well.
Right, and I think back to what you said about PE firms. I mean, they can be excellent deal makers, but they're not always. And I think a lot of them would be first to admit that they're not always the person on the operational aspect. I mean, that's partly why they're interested in the business. They think it does well, or maybe they have some resources that can help them.
Yeah, the numbers have to make sense, right? You have to figure out what's the right capital structure and how you make sure it all sort of works, but numbers don't give you the entire picture, and you need expertise that can augment that capability. So you're right. I think the enlightened private equity folks would say, yeah, I mean, no one's good at everything. So celebrate what you're good at, and then bring in some talent around you that can help you where you just haven't had the at-bats as much as other people have.
Right. Well, back to your regression analysis, where you figured out, it's the people that make the mix and the math work. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for watching M&A Advisor TV.